When a death occurs, much sympathy is felt and there is generally very little suspicion that anything is amiss. When another family member dies, followed by another death, then it's definitely worth investigating. This, it transpired, was the case of a family in Victorian Liverpool. Sisters Catherine Flanagan, born in 1829, and Margaret Higgins, born in 1843, hailed from Ireland and had moved to Liverpool in 1864. The two sisters lived at 5 Skirving Street, where Catherine ran a lodging house, while Margaret was a charwoman. Living with them was 22-year-old John Flanagan, Catherine's son, Thomas Higgins, who became her second husband, her first husband Joseph having died previously, and his 10-year-old daughter Mary from his previous marriage. Also living there was Thomas Patrick Jennings and his 18-year-old daughter Margaret. In December 1880, the formerly healthy John Flanagan died. His mother had informed neighbours that he was ill, telling them, "He is in consumption. He will never live to comb a grey hair." As it turned out, he possibly had TB, which was common at the time. But was he a victim of his mother's and aunt's greed? After his death, his mother collected £71 from 5 different insurance companies, which at the time amounted to around 2 years' wages. At this point, no suspicions were raised. In 1882, following the blossoming of romance between Margaret Flanagan and Higgins, the two were married in October of that year. Just a few months later, young Mary died, and the £22 in insurance was collected. Then in January 1883, Margaret Jennings died, and Catherine collected the insurance money on her, amounting to £20. In those days, you could insure someone without their knowledge or their consent. As a result of these deaths, the sisters knew it was time to move on, ending up at their new home at 27 Ascot Street. By this time, Thomas Higgins was well insured, and in September 1883, he began to become unwell. The policies amounted to £100, but Catherine approached the insurers on behalf of Margaret to see about taking out a further insurance policy on him, amounting to £50. The insurers thought this was rather strange, so decided they would need a medical examination of Higgins before issuing the cover. A doctor and representative of the insurance cover appeared on the doorstep of the Ascot Street house to see him, but were stoutly and strongly told to leave. At this point, Higgins knew nothing about the insurance policy on his life, and when he died on 22nd October 1883, the doctor who issued the death certificate cited the cause of death as dysentery due to excessive drinking of cheap alcohol. The insurance companies were quickly made aware of the death, and the two of them, the British Workmen Insurance Company and the Scottish Legal Life Assurance Company, paid out £12 9 shillings and sixpence and £7 17 shillings and sixpence, respectively. However, Patrick Higgins, Thomas's brother, had got wind of the attempt at putting extra insurance on the policy, remembered all the deaths at Skirving Street, and this didn't sit right with him. He raised his concerns with the insurance companies about the possibility of foul play. He then went to Shaw Street and spoke to Dr. Whitford, who'd attended to Higgins during his illness, and he agreed to go and look at the house where his patient had died. When he arrived, Catherine beat a hasty retreat and fled. The doctor carried out a post-mortem at Higgins' house during the wake, and following a series of tests, concluded that Higgins had died of arsenic poisoning. Soon after this, Margaret Higgins was arrested for the murder of her husband, and evidence of arsenic powder was found by Dr. Campbell Brown in an apron pocket worn by her, and a bottle containing a white powder in liquid also turned out to be arsenic. A wanted poster was distributed for the capture of her sister. Not only did they describe her, but they also enforced on the minds of the public her strong Irish accent. Catherine was finally captured just over a week later at Wavertree. The two sisters were charged with the murder of 36-year-old Higgins on 16th October 1883 and committed for trial for the murder. They were also implicated in the murder of Margaret Jennings on 25th January 1883 and John Flanagan Jr. on 7th December 1880, while Margaret was also charged with the murder of her stepdaughter Mary. However, the Crown prosecutor decided to go with the first indictment only, that of the murder of Higgins. On Thursday, 14th February 1884 at St George's Hall in Liverpool, their trial got underway before Mr Justice Butt. The two women were defended by William Pickford, Queen's Counsel, and Henry Gordon Shee, Queen's Counsel, with the funding to pay for them coming from the Poor Persons Defence Fund. The Crown prosecution case was led by John Aspinall. The bodies of the three other victims were exhumed, and traces of arsenic was found in all of them, but the prosecution case rested mainly on circumstantial evidence. There was no concrete evidence the two women had administered the poison, and their defence claimed the arsenic in the exhumed bodies could have got there by the leaking through the soil in the graveyard. In his summing up, the judge was scathing of the insurance companies. He also reminded the jury that Campbell Brown had also discovered arsenic in Higgins' spleen, which he believed meant the dead man had been poisoned over a period of time before he succumbed. Did they believe arsenic poisoning had been the cause of death? Did they believe the women had administered it? Following the jury's half-hour of deliberations, the sisters were found guilty of murder, and the judge passed the death sentence on them. Catherine later confessed that they got the arsenic from a particular flypaper that contained enough to kill, and claimed many more had been murdered in this way for insurance fraud by others she knew. Whether what she said was true or not, it was never believed. The pair were held at Kirkdale Prison, known as the Kirkdale House of Correction, in Liverpool, where 55-year-old Catherine and 41-year-old Margaret were hanged simultaneously on Monday, 3rd March 1884, as the snow fell. The executioner was Bartholomew Binns, assisted by Samuel Heath. The women's bodies were cut down and they were buried within the prison grounds. In 1893, the prison closed and was demolished. It is now a recreation ground. Binns carried out his last execution at Kirkdale a week later, after which he was sacked for being drunk and incompetent at carrying out hangings, following the botched hanging of 18-year-old Michael McLean. Questions remain about how many people actually died at the hands of Catherine and Margaret. Had Catherine's first husband Joseph also fallen foul of the women? Were these the only victims, or were there many more? We may never know the true number of lives taken by the Black Widows of Liverpool.